Welcome to Elevate Women in Tech, Breaking Taboos in Women's Health series. In this series, we normally explore women's health issues, but today we're doing something different. For International Men's Day 2024, we're having our first ever men's takeover episode because we believe that health advocacy knows no gender. With this year's theme focused on men's health champions, as women were often the catalyst for health discussions in our families and communities. And today we're using our platform to spotlight a critical men's health issue, prostate cancer awareness. I'm Kelly Quartain, founder of Halzac Elevate Women in Tech, and today I'm interviewing someone whose health journey deeply impacted me and our family. I'd like to welcome to the episode my husband, Michael Quartain, co-founder of Halzac and the Elevate Women in Tech community. And today we'll be sharing his experience as a prostate cancer survivor at the age of 47, to demonstrate why we need to break down health barriers for everyone, regardless of gender. Just as our series regularly highlights disparities in women's healthcare, today we're addressing a stark reality in men's health. Did you know, on average, circa 12,000 men will die from prostate cancer every year? This is 33 men per day, one every 45 minutes. Prostate cancer is the second most common cause of cancer death in men's health in men in the UK, and these statistics remind us that health advocacy is interconnected. When we empower any group to take charge of their health, we all benefit. Michael, it's great to have you on the show today and to share this experience with us.
Thank you for having me. This is actually the first time that I'm going to talk publicly about it. So a little bit nervous, but looking forward to sharing my story, to be fair.
For those in the audience that don't know, Mike obviously is a co-founder of the community, and he has been a supporter of this series since well before it actually began, often listening to our discussions and sharing ideas for episodes. So today, like he's just said, the tables are turned. This is the first time he's going to be talking about this. So it might be emotional, maybe for us both, but let's see how things go. So let's start right at the beginning. Can you take us through the story and starting with what made you conscious about your health in the first place and possibly that something might be wrong?
Well, to be fair, I, like many men, I took my health for granted and I didn't regularly go to the doctors. I was quite inclined to let things sort themselves out. And to be fair, I felt relatively healthy. So really what triggered me to go to the doctors was my 40-year-old health check, which actually was late because of COVID. So because of that reason, I didn't end up having that health check until I was 45. But even at that point, I felt like it was a regular appointment that was going to tell me that I was overweight, that I may be drinking a little bit too much. The usual things that you'll hear a doctor tell you. But on this particular occasion, when I went in for the appointment, due to my dad suffering from prostate cancer, and also friends of mine talking about being tested, it was just on my mind. So I just felt it was something that I would just ask to see if I could have it done. And what was interesting is the first thing the doctor said to me was I was too young. So I kind of insisted from that point because of my dad, and as soon as he heard my history, he was happy to do the blood test. So that's really how it all started from there. A regular trip to the doctors, feeling really good. And as we'll go on to discuss, a few shocks along the way.
And that definitely was a fair few shocks along the way for us. And then, like you said, we will discuss it further. I think, being diagnosed at 47, you mentioned it there, they don't normally test until 50, was a huge shock. So can you share with us all how you processed this yourself as a diagnosis and how we navigated this journey together? Because It definitely has been a journey for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I go from that point of doing the blood test, doing a PSA test, it was most probably a couple of weeks from there. The doctors called me in to discuss my health check. And he mentioned that my PSA was slightly elevated. He didn't think it was much, but he said just to be sure, he was going to pass me on to have an MRI scan, which would give a lot more clarity to what the blood test was telling us. So even at this point, to be fair, I didn't actually think that there was a problem. So I went for the MRI, did that regular to be fair, and then waited for the results of that. But if you remember, what was interesting about that is before I got the results of the MRI, I had a message to say that I needed to go for a biopsy. So I think at that point we both thought, it's not quite right, doesn't sound right. And even to be fair, no one had really explained what the process would be. So from having that blood test to having the MRI, still at no point had anyone said to me, actually, the reason we're going a little bit further is because we think, oh, we've seen something. So we got the biopsy appointment through. And I think we can say that was the first time that we kind of knew it was serious, because of the doctor that was there, because of the questions they were asking me. I think that was the very first time that we were actually shown what they were looking at and what was worrying them. I know that may sound a little bit crazy, but really through the process at the early stages, they're always erring on the side of caution, because a lot of times your PSA can be high and they're not actually be an issue. So I don't believe really anyone wanted to worry me until that biopsy. And, the biopsy was quite an invasive procedure, to be fair, especially when I wasn't prepared for it. So with that biopsy, they have to take samples from the area that they believe there's an issue with. So I think in total I had 11 biopsies taken. And yeah, that was an uncomfortable procedure, an eye-opening procedure in a lot of ways, and quite a comical moment, because I think the nurse, the doctors, they could all see I was nervous, and I think they could all tell that I'd never been examined in that way before. So yeah, it was definitely a moment that makes your eyes water, but not painful, just uncomfortable. So that's really where we got to that point. Still worrying, still trying to think very positively, but still knowing that there was the potential of bad news. So I think from that point there, we waited for those biopsies to come through. I think we waited about a month for that. And interestingly enough, the appointment came through to review the biopsy, and it was on a Sunday, which we both thought was unusual, not realising that the hospital was fully functional on a Sunday. And we went to that appointment hoping for the best, but knowing there was a slight possibility that I could get bad news. And I think I'll always remember that moment when the news came, because it was a little bit surreal when the consultant finally broke the news to us. I don't know if you remember, there was a long silence, and a real It felt like it went on for ages. Say that again.
So it was like we knew it was going to be said, but didn't really expect it to be said. That makes it was very bizarre.
No, definitely. I don't know anyone who's watching this and you've been unfortunate to be given the diagnosis of cancer. It is a surreal moment, and what made that moment even more surreal was almost immediately after being told that I had cancer. They said that I needed to do a CT scan to see whether or not it spread. And that was like a real sobering moment, that when they said that, because it felt like for the previous month, all I'd heard was bad news. Go to the doctors, test my PSA, that was too high. Go for an MRI, it showed something. Go for a biopsy, it showed something. So when he said the words, we're going to have to check to see if it spread, I just in that moment felt it has spread. I'm not going to survive it. So then you go through this whirl of emotions, thinking about your mortality, thinking about your family, thinking about who you're going to tell, then going through a denial that it's not really happening, that you don't want to tell anybody, you don't want to share it. All of that happened. I think that all happened in that 3 minutes. And yeah, so it was just a surreal moment there, really surreal moment. I think we walked out the hospital and both cried in that moment. And then you kick back into, it'll be all right, it'll be all right. It's not a problem, we'll get it sorted. So, yeah, that month was a whirlwind of emotions, a little bit of why me, you feel a little bit like, what have I done to deserve that? I'm only young. My kids are only young. So there's a lot of things that go through your mind. And then to be fair, there's a little bit of denial. From that point on, there's denial. Because you're walking around with something inside you that you know potentially could kill you. But you feel fine. You don't feel any different than you did the day before, which is a really strange feeling of knowing that you're ill, but you don't feel ill. Knowing that you've got to do something about it, but you don't really want to. So, the emotions are real up and down, and I feel, I can only look at it from my point of view, but a lot of the fear and a lot of the worry is, how is your partner going to cope with it? And that was a lot of my worry for you in that period. I could see that you were being strong for me, but who was being strong for you? Who was going to give you that support? And I made you keep it quiet for a period of time as well. So you had to burden that on your own shoulders by yourself, until I felt strong enough to start to share it. So, yeah, emotions were running high, but I was very lucky in a lot of ways. Not only did I have your support, some of my friends really stepped up and gave me emotional support, physical support, which was so needed, because you don't realise how low you get day to day. You try and forget about it, but it's always there in the back of your mind. So to have people around you that were lifting, that were keeping you positive, that were helping you prepare for what was coming up, was amazing. So, yeah, I think that really kind of encapsulates how I felt over that first initial diagnosis and acknowledgement of what I had.
I think just hearing some of that back, it brings back so many memories. I think during that time, it felt at times for me that time just stood still. and it was just in this like Groundhog Day movie,
Bubble.
doing this same thing over and over and over again. And we laughed quite a lot about some of the silly things and tried to find humour in a lot of the procedures that you had to go through and things like that. Cried a hell of a lot as well. We cried to friends and family. I know for me, particularly your sister Marsha was an absolute rock. She was just there for me along the way, and especially at those, like you said, those early stages where you didn't feel comfortable sharing. I think she was the first person we shared the news with and had those conversations with, and yeah, it definitely became my support. And I know she was a huge support to you as well. But one thing that you mentioned there, and I think in our series for the Women's Health series, we talk a lot about how women build support networks and health advocacy for each other. But I think what your story just shows, and I know from living it with you, was actually how, as your male network and how your friendships come together, how you built that advocacy health network and how they supported you at your darkest moments, because it was dark and it was tough, to take through that journey, you know, talking about the invasive side of things, talking about, you know, the embarrassing side of things as well, which was quite, and again, that was supported.
Well, funny you say that, because I was put in contact with a man who I've never met to this day. I've only spoken to him on the phone. His name's Neil. We have a mutual friend, and our mutual friend had known that he had gone through it recently and thought it might be helpful for me to be able to speak to him. And it was really, it was the best thing for me to speak to somebody who had recently just gone through it, because there's questions that you don't think of when you're with the doctor, or there's things that come up that you may forget to mention to the doctor, which I was able to speak to him about. And that was really helpful pre-op for me, to prepare myself for the operation and what it actually meant, and, you know, how difficult it could be in some ways, how uncomfortable it could be, but also knowing that because he was ahead of me, him telling me each week how much better he was feeling, it obviously made me more comfortable with what I was about to deal with. So Neil was a real godsend, considering that, as I said, I've never met this man. The things that we shared together, you know, you wouldn't think that you'd be able to share stuff like that with a man that you've never actually seen or met before. But he was great. And as you said, some of my personal friends who, you know, really just kept me going on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I know some people struggled with it. Some people struggled to know what to say, or to know when to say it. And I think that meant that they most probably stepped away a little bit more. And I get that, because for some people it's not a comfortable thing. It brings back memories of maybe experiences that they've had in their own lives, and they don't want to relive that. But, you know, I get that. And I say to, again, anybody who's listening to this, you will find some of your close friends will struggle to find a way to talk about it, to find a way to talk about it without getting upset. It is difficult in that period. But I think you have to understand that everyone deals with it in a different way. And what I realized is, you know, the people who have experienced it within themselves or within their family, they most probably were able to cope with it a little bit better, than people that it was the first time that they had someone close to them that had found out that they've got cancer. So, yeah, that was really an eye-opener for me in a lot of ways. But as I said, I was very blessed to have some really good people support me through that. So, yeah.
I think the power of that friendship network that you had, and those friends that you never knew you had, these new people that come along, I think one thing that I really saw off the back of this was how, even though you talked about all the embarrassing things that you had to go through as well, was actually how your friends and how your friendship group really took this on board for themselves and went out and you know they went out and got tested and really embraced that actually, as black men, you know, a lot of your friends are black men, how prostate cancer can really impact black men more than anybody else. So like 1 in 4 black men, you know, are diagnosed with prostate cancer. So I don't know if you can share with us a little bit, you know, what that diagnosis effect had on your friendship group and what were some of the outcomes, because it really shocked us, some of the outcomes that actually did come. And it was really great.
It did really shock. One of the things I realised when I got diagnosed, and you tell other people, you tell people to get checked, I think what you find sometimes is people will, and I did this, I used to do this, someone tells you these things, and you think, yeah, that sounds great, but it won't happen to me. And I definitely was guilty of that. And I feel when I actually told my group, there was specifically a WhatsApp group, I think it had different impacts on different people. I think everyone clearly was sorry to hear the news. For some people, that absolutely kick-started them to go and get themselves checked immediately. And I think for some people, maybe they thought, yeah, I'm going to do that at some point. But I'm worried about the examination, which, you know, let's get the elephant out of the room now. Yes, there's various ways to check the prostate. I think most doctors and consultants would say the best way to check it is actually a manual check. And yes, guys, that does mean fingers at the bottom. But they will say that is one of the best ways to check. Yes, uncomfortable. Yes, a little bit embarrassing. But I always say, if you've been lucky enough to see your partner, your wife, give birth to a child, you realise that women have to put their dignity at the door to have a baby. And if they can do that, then I'm sure we can go through a 10-second examination. But as I said at the beginning of this, that isn't the only way. I never had that examination until I was just about to have the biopsy. So that was quite late into the journey. But blood tests are the easy way. As it's said, it's not foolproof. No blood test is foolproof in that regards, but it is a good indicator. And then the MRI is actually most probably the one that will give you the information that you need. So I feel, for me, I was very lucky because the stages were very seamless. So I just wanted to put that out there to anyone who's concerned about that. It's really, it's nothing. It's nothing at all. In terms of the group, I was really pleased that it triggered people to go and get tested. And beyond my wildest dreams, I don't know dreams, but beyond my wildest nightmare, I should say. One of my close friends, he came back and found out that he had it as well, which was a real shocker for me to hear him say that. And when he announced that to the group, I think anybody who didn't get checked in the group, I think it made them think it's time for me to get checked now. And lo and behold, another person within our group, and this group most probably had no more than 15 people in it. 15, 16 people, all black guys. And out of that group, 3 of them were diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, yes, I was the youngest one out of the 3, but we're talking about the age range between 40, was 46 at the time of the diagnosis, I think. So between 46 and 50, 56. And we all found out that we had it. Thankfully, all three people found out that it hadn't spread, but all had to then go on to have the operation. So that really hit home to me how prevalent this disease is in men. And obviously, as you said, 1 in 4 black men. And I think in our group, it was exactly that. Exactly 1 in 4 had it, which is unbelievably scary, considering that none of us at the time considered that we had symptoms. None of us at the time believed that there was anything wrong with us. Now, in hindsight, looking back, I think we've all been able to look back and think, maybe there were signs. And for me, one of the signs were I was getting up in the night to go to the toilet quite a lot. I was really struggling to hold my wee. So when I needed to go at that moment. I most probably couldn't do longer than an hour and a half journey in a car without needing to stop and go to the toilet, which at the time, you just think that's normal. You don't think that's an unusual thing. Maybe you've drunk too much, maybe I drank too much before I went to bed. They're all the things that you put it to. Maybe I've got a water infection. But looking back in hindsight, I think they were signs that was telling me that something wasn't quite as normal. And the scary thing is, I think I could have most probably gone another 5 years with those signs and not thought anything of it. And to think that the potential of that 5 years, it could have spread. It would have spread, because when I actually had the operation, even though they believed that it was contained in the prostate, when they actually went in to do the operation, they realised that it had started to break out. So it meant that they had to cut a little bit more of the area away to make sure that they got all the cancer removed. So that was a really scary thought, that at 47, it was actually on the way to spreading already. So, that's just told me how lucky I am and how important it is to get those checks.
In terms of the medical procedure that you had, obviously you had was it called a prostatectomy, where you had the whole prostate?
A radical,
is that right?
A prostatectomy, it was called. Yeah, I never miss out the radical, because I think that emphasizes the actual procedure. The procedure, it's interesting. As I said, my friend also was diagnosed. And one of the things I had to do before the operation was lose quite a bit of weight, because the procedure is keyhole through your stomach down into your prostate. And if you're carrying too much weight, especially around your stomach area, it just makes the operation harder, and it makes the recovery harder. So that was really my first goal to try and hit, is to get my BMI down. And again, I had some great support. A friend of mine, Byron, was unbelievable in that period, helping me lose weight. And also Johnny Hammond, who took it upon himself to personal train me and help me get to the goals that I wanted to achieve. So I was very lucky in that respect. But I still will say that I think the procedure was made harder because of my weight. As you remember, I went in that day for the surgery. I think it took about 4 hours to remove it. And one of the things that you do when you come out of the operation, you have a catheter fitted. So anyone who's had the pleasures or the displeasure of having a catheter, yeah, very uncomfortable thing to have. Not enjoyable at all, but a necessity, to be fair. So I came out of surgery. They said that, it was a little bit tough to remove, but they got everything, thankfully. But it was at that point that, the journey really kicked in, because anyone who's had a radical prostatectomy, they'll tell you it's a tough operation. The recovery is quite brutal. And, you can't rush the stages. And unfortunately for me, I had a few complications in my recovery, which isn't common. I must say that it isn't common. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. And I really, really struggled, most probably for 8 weeks after the operation. And what we found out is that I had my urethra was leaking into my body. So it's kind of like almost poisoning me, essentially. But that wasn't picked up for 3 or 4 weeks after the operation. So I was almost readmitted into hospital, which was just the last place I wanted to be at that point. I was really struggling to pass water, having lots of spasms. And yeah, it was, when I look back at it, again, talking about it now, kind of taking myself back to that time, it was hard. It was really hard. And I think what made it harder is I'm trying to get through it, and I can see everyone around me can see I'm getting worse and worse. Struggling to eat, struggling to drink. And yeah, so just a really desperate time, to be fair. And I feel like that was that period there, most probably for you and I, was the most difficult period. Trying to keep it from the kids, because at this point we hadn't told the kids that I had cancer. I told them that I was going in for the snip because I didn't want to worry them. My daughter was just starting secondary school, and my son was going into year 4, I think it was. So I really didn't want to worry them. I didn't want them to stress out about it. But obviously they knew there was something pretty wrong with me. So, we got through that period after a few visits to the hospital, having to readjust that catheter, and a lot of medicine. But, once I started to heal, to be fair, the healing process then was quite quick. So I think if I hadn't had the complications, then it would have been relatively straightforward, but again, still painful, still awkward. But what I would say about the operation is, now I'm 14 months on from the operation, and my scars are virtually healed. Well, I don't think you'd even know that I'd had that type of operation, and I'm feeling like I'm almost back to 100%. But it's been a slow and long road, but I almost feel back to what normal is. And again, anyone who's had a catheter, I think one of the most difficult things is to overcome the mental block of feeling like you're wetting yourself, feeling like you smell of wee. It's a lot of mental to deal with, and that was hard. But again, I think I wasn't alone. All the men who have had this operation will tell you that, post-op, having to, use pads, things like that, are really difficult. And it does affect your confidence. For a period, I didn't really want to go out, because of my fear of wetting myself or smelling of weed. And that took a little while to overcome, to be fair. But, once the body starts to heal, you do feel your confidence starts to come back and you start to feel yourself again. So I was very lucky, even though with all the complications, I felt like I got back to being dry quite quickly and having control of myself, going to the toilet relatively quickly, considering how sick I was. So that's something that now I look back on, and I'm very grateful, because I know some people do struggle with that for many years after the operation, many years after. So that's something I'm grateful. But they do say the younger you are, the quicker it is for you to heal with these things. So yeah, it's definitely quite difficult to talk about that period, because it was a hard period.
Definitely was. I think it was a journey, that was for sure. I think for me, the hardest point, finding out that when they said the word cancer in that room, was really hard. But I think me personally, because obviously I wasn't living in your head with all of the tests and so everything that was going on, with seeing you after the operation and going through that, just not knowing how to help you was just so hard. And like I said, trying to keep everything going, keeping the kids absolutely on track with the many different things that they had going on. But we made it, and some excellent friends really stepped up. People that just didn't expect really stepped forward. Obviously, my mum and dad were really there for us as well. And just, yeah, and then obviously there were some friends that actually shocked us both, and, in terms of what they did and didn't do, and maybe for personal reasons, or maybe just not that awareness. And it is a journey. And I think, when you come out the other side of it, I think it definitely comes out much stronger. And having to live through that. So yeah, hearing you talk about all of that, it takes me back to like this time just over a year ago when we were actually living through it. And I just think now, how did we get through it? But we made it, and we're through the other side.
Can I just say, sorry, on that, I just wanted to say, because you just reminded me of something. And one thing I learned from that, when you talk about friends, and as I said, I'm very aware for different people, for different reasons, cause them to react a different way. But one thing I did appreciate and will never forget, and I'm now going to put this into stuff I do. It's easy for us to say, I'm going to do something, to support that person. But the people that absolutely astonished me were the people who just did it. They didn't ask. They didn't ask for permission. They turned up at the door. And if I was too ill to come to the door, then they would leave something there for me. They just made the point of coming to see me. And for some of those people, I think they were a little bit shocked when they saw me and realised how ill I was. But no, I really, if there's one lesson I learned from that whole thing is, don't say you're going to do something. Just do it. Because those people you're doing it for, I don't think you realise how much they'll appreciate in those moments where they're feeling low or they're feeling down. They'll really appreciate that. And that's not just for me. That's, for whoever your partner is as well. So we had people that would cook for us, just bring food round. And you know what? In those days where you had no time to do anything other than make sure the kids were all right, or make sure Kelly was making sure that the business was still running, bringing that food round and just knowing that you could heat it up and eat something good rather than junk, it was amazing. So all those people, you know who you are, and I thank you again from that. Thank you again. So sorry to interrupt you. I had to just say.
That's fine. I think what I was about to say was obviously the women's health theories that we set up was all about kind of raising awareness and health advocacy. And I think sometimes with health advocacy, it often starts with just one person's voice or a voice just speaking up and sharing their lived experience. And I think, what I want to thank you for today is that you've become that voice for men's health, especially with regards to prostate cancer. I know there's many men out there that talk about their journeys and experience. So, I just want to thank you for sharing that with the audience today. I think what I would like to ask, though, is if there was, I don't know, how has your experience of going through what you went through changed your perspective to be a bit more open and a bit more willing and a bit more kind of, I don't know, your approach around men's health concerns? Because I think before, like you said, you probably would have buried your head in the sand. Your 40-year-old health check happened when you were 45, 46. So your 50-year health check, which you should have had when this test should happen, God knows when that would have happened, and who knows what the outcome would have been. It definitely would have been cancer in more than your prostate. So yeah, how has this experience changed your perspective, and how are you different now in discussing men's health concerns?
Well, first and foremost, I have no airs and graces. I can talk about every aspect of prostate cancer and not feel embarrassed. Men may not know this, that after you have the operation, one of the things that you struggle with is to be able to get an erection, because the nerves have been damaged in that area. And another thing that men may not know is after having that operation, you can't have children, which I clearly wasn't planning to have any more children. But when you're told that you can't, it's something for you to think about. It's something for you to really understand, and you realise how it changes you as a man. So I think more than anything, I've just become a lot more open about it. I'm a lot more comfortable going to the hospital now and examinations. Obviously now I have to go back to the hospital every 3 months to check my PSA, to make sure that it's clearly gone, which, we had the confirmation that all of the cancer was removed, which was a great, great letter to receive. But you still have a little bit of fear in you. You still have a bit of worry about it. So for me, the biggest thing that's changed is my willingness to go to a doctor and be able to discuss things, my willingness to be honest about how I feel and what I'm going through. I feel like with this, what's given me so much, I feel so, maybe my proudest thing about this has been knowing that the impact I've had on other people to either get checked or to get involved with prostate cancer charities. Friends of mine who have now done multiple prostate walks, and just to talk about it. So for me, I feel if I can help one other person to get that early diagnosis, then I've done my job. I suppose the person I am, I didn't want to tell people because I didn't want sympathy. I wasn't, the type of guy I am is, I prefer to deal with things myself. So telling other people, I always felt like I was saying, poor me. And I didn't want that. But at some points, that's how I felt. So I think that's definitely been the biggest thing in me, is my willingness to share with people but still be conscious not to try and ram it down anybody's throats. Because, you know, the saying, some people will and still do believe, well, I'm a fit guy, I exercise every day, I eat right, so I'm okay. And what I think we've all realised recently, especially with Sir Chris Hoy being brave enough to share his diagnosis with everybody, I don't believe anyone could be fitter than, is he a 4-time Olympic champion? You know, lived his life as a model professional, and it happened to him. So I think what he definitely showed everybody is it could happen to anybody. And you know, the only way that you can be sure that it's not happening to you is to get yourself checked. So, you know, that's the message that I give out there. And that's most probably the thing that's changed me most is my willingness to share that.
If there was one thing that you would like to see changed in the prostate screening process, I know we've spoke about this at depth a lot, but what would you like to see change with regards to that?
I think the same way women are checked for cervical cancer, I believe, is that from the age of 18 that they start smear checks and stuff.
Oh,
25. I think they should lower the age for men to a minimum of 30. Now, you may think that's way too young, but for some people, unfortunately, that's when it starts. And it is a very slow moving cancer. But because it's a silent cancer, the problem being is a lot of the time when it's found, it's too late. So I personally think that we should be checking men, especially men who have got history in their family from the age of 30. Because if that was to happen, then there should be no reason why any man should be given the news that Sir Chris Hoy was given, to be told that it had spread all around his body, in his bones, and essentially it's a terminal diagnosis that just shouldn't happen in this day and age. So if I could change anything, it would be that. I believe they've lowered the age now that you can get checked to 45 if you have history in your family. But I hope that, especially in black men, because of the statistics that say we have double the chance of getting prostate cancer, I think I'd like to see that improved in black men's health. So, you know, they're the two things that I would say, the earlier checks and increased checks for black men.
Definitely something that needs to happen. And obviously you mentioned Sir Chris Hoy. He's obviously raised the profile. The new government that's come in, they've put it onto the health secretary's kind of radar. And hopefully, you know, they might start to listen, and that those actual changes to lower that age will come in, and hopefully it will save many men's lives. Like I mentioned at the start, 12,000 men a year are dying from prostate cancer. One man every 45 minutes. I mean, that's just an insane number. And it's something that a simple blood test, when they're having other generic blood tests done, could just be a really easy way to save so many lives. So yeah.
Really good. Well, definitely, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for taking the time to do this. And also, you know, for me, anyone who watches this, to know that if caught early, it's not a death sentence. But the important thing is to catch it early. And I think it's also important for the people who have experienced it, you know, to keep on talking about it, to keep on pushing. You know, we're trying to raise some money for Prostate UK. We're trying to raise £250 for it. So it'd be great if, you know, you can donate towards that, because, you know, the technology is moving on quickly. it's not a death sentence. And the more we know about it, the more we understand it. Hopefully in the future, people won't have to go through what I went through, you know, and people won't have to hear that terrible news that it's spread and there's nothing they can do with it. So that's really important for me. And I hope, you know, the awareness continues to grow. And more than anything, from my point of view, understand that I feel I'm in a great place now. And your role is just to make sure your loved ones don't suffer from what I did, if you can catch it early. So that's what I'd like to say.
Well, thanks for sharing your story with us today, for bridging that gap, I suppose, for this episode between men and women's health advocacy. I think it's like I said, health knows no boundaries, it knows no genders. And I think there's more that we can do when we come and we talk and we share those experiences. Also, thanks for sharing the fact that we are trying to raise some money for Prostate Cancer UK. I think as a charity, during your diagnosis process, when you were poorly after the operation, they were amazing. I know that I called out to them a couple of times. I think you spoke to them a couple of times in that early diagnosis phase, and they really are a huge support network for those that are just don't really know where to go. When you don't have those doctors that you can speak to, because you are left for quite periods of time just wondering and in your thoughts. They are, professional, trained, they're nurses that can support you. There's lots of networking opportunities there as well to really kind of go out and find those people that can help you. So yeah, thanks for sharing. And if this has resonated with you and you are able to support, it would be great if you could click on the link that we're going to share and donate to prostate cancer. All funds go directly straight to Prostate Cancer UK. And just to wrap up the show then, to our listeners, whether it's women's or men's health, the goal is the same. It's creating communities where everyone feels empowered to take charge of their health. If you have men in your life over 45 or over 40 with risk factors, such as a dad who's had prostate cancer, or a mother who's had cervical cancer or breast cancer, please do encourage them to go and talk to their doctor about prostate cancer screening, because at the end of the day, one conversation really can save a life. So thanks for having us today.
Thank you very much.